Welcome to a battlefield of minds. Two grandmasters face off where every move cuts like a sword. One mistake, and it's over. This isn't just chess. It's war disguised as strategy. Let's dive in, move by move, into this epic clash. Juan Ramon begins with 1. e4, the war trumpet sounds. The central pawn marches boldly forward, opening fire lanes for his queen and bishop. A classical declaration of battle, as if planting a flag right in the heart of the battlefield. Wesley So counters with 1. c5, the Sicilian wall of spikes. His pawn storms the flank like a sneaky cavalry charge, refusing to bow to White's central pride. The message is clear. If you want war, I'll give you chaos. No.1. White answers with 2. And if 3, the knight leaps out, like a scout riding ahead of the army. He eyes Black's c5 pawn, and prepares the way for future central conquest. Black develops 2, and cheeks another knight, gallops forward, reinforcing the c5 pawn and claiming control of the critical d4 square. Wesley builds his fortress, with cool precision, e8. White strikes with 3 battalion. d4, boom, and dismantled. Another pawn surges into the center, challenging Black's flank pawn head-on. Juan Ramon shows he's not here to dance, but to smash. Wesley replies 3, cx4, and the first clash of steel. The c5 pawn chomps down White's d4 pawn with a brutal crunch, drawing blood on move 3. The battlefield is already littered with debris. White doesn't hesitate. 4. Next 4, the knight charges in and retakes the d4 pawn betty. Steel meets steel, and the white knight plants himself in the very heart of Black's camp. Black snaps back with 4. Nf6. Another knight springs into action, pointing its lance straight at the e4 pawn. Wesley's knights are circling like wolves around a campfire. White calmly continues. 5. nc3. The second knight joins the fray, guarding e4 and reinforcing d5. Juan Ramon now has 2 steeds controlling the center, like twin generals on horseback. D. Black answers 5, f5, a thunderous push. The pawn slams into the center, driving at White's knight and locking horns in a test of courage. Wesley's army marches with grim determination. White's knight retreats with 6. And d5, but don't be fooled. This is no coward's move. The horseman gallops to the edge, glaring at Zix like a sniper eyeing his target. Pressure builds, and Wesley knows it. Black fires back 6, 6. The pawn steps forward like a shield wall, protecting e5 and shutting the door on White's ambitions. Solid sturdy, like a Roman phalanx planting their spears. White tries 7. Checkmate. Beg a5. The bishop emerges, pinning the knight on f6 pawn stew. The long-range sniper says, "Don't you dare move, or your queen will pay the price." No. Wesley calmly pushes 7. a6. The black pawn storms forward, shoving the knight on b5. Back off, horsey, or get trampled. The battlefield shakes from the advance. White hops away with 8 pawn. Na3. The knight retreats again, sneaking to the corner but still eyeing c4 like a hidden assassin. Not gone, just waiting for his chance. Black seizes space with 8. b5, another pawn push, grabbing the queen's side with brute force. Wesley builds a pawn wall, daring white to crash into it. White strikes back with 9. Bxfs. The bishop sacrifices itself, slicing down the knight on f6 with surgical precision. A loud thwack echoes as blood is spilled. Black recaptures 9. Gxf6x. The g-pawn takes the bishop, ripping open his kingside in the process. Wesley snarls, "Fine, my pawn structure is ugly, but my bishops are alive, and my rook has firepower." White jumps in with 10 Deutsche. nd5. The knight storms forward, planting a flag deep in enemy territory. This horse is fearless, standing on a critical outpost, threatening carnage to come. Black coolly responds 10-5. The f-pawn lunges ahead, protecting e4 and screaming, "This is my land." Wesley expands aggressively, ready to swing his forces into battle. White slashes with 11. x5. The e-pawn swings his blade and chops down black's 5-pawn. First blood in the center. The knight on d5 roars with approval as the lines open up. Black strikes back 11. Bees5. The bishop glides in, reclaiming the pawn with elegance, as if saying, "You thought you won something? Think again." The black sharpshooter plants himself on f5. White builds with 12 a tree. Key. A pawn move that looks quiet, but it's really fortification. Like carpenters building a bunker, Juan Ramon is ready to anchor his knight on d4 and challenge the dark squares. Black develops 12. Bake 7. The fianchetto-like bishop rises to the long diagonal, his laser beam fixed on the central battlefield. Wesley's artillery now covers half the board. White adds muscle with 13. NCTU. The knight backtracks to support b4 and d4. It's like pulling an archer to the rear to reload before returning to the front. Black calmly 13. b6. Another bishop steps forward, targeting d5 and preparing castling. Two bishops now stare like twin cannons aimed across the plains. White pushes 14 a. a4. A pawn jab on the queen side, probing the black b5 pawn. Like a soldier, kicking the enemy's barricade, testing for weaknesses. Wesley answers 14. Oh. The king slides into safety, tucked behind his pawn wall. The black rook now breathes fire along the f-file, hungry for action. White lashes out, with 15. Axe 5. The a-pawn crashes into the b5 pawn, smashing down the barricade with a resounding BAM! The queen's side lines are opening, chaos guaranteed. Black recaptures 15. Axe b5. The a-pawn takes back with fury, rebuilding the wall in one swift motion. Wesley refuses to let Juan Ramon break through so easily. White swings heavy artillery with 16. rx8. The rook storms down and smashes black's rook on a8. A brutal cannon exchange begins with a deafening blast. Black instantly answers 16. Qq8. The black queen swoops in like a vulture, recapturing the rook and claiming the open file as her hunting ground. Wesley's queen is officially on the prowl. White bites back with 17. Bx b5. Bishop strikes, tearing the pawn off b5. A clean surgical strike, leaving black's queenside weaker. Juan Ramon is playing with fire in his eyes. Black roars 17. In 4, the knight gallops forward to d4, fangs bared, threatening white's queen in squares all around. Wesley's counterplay is vicious, like a wolf lunging for the throat. White swings 18. Nay7. The knight dives in with a shocking check, waving his sword at black's king. The board shakes as Juan Ramon yells, "Feel my steel!" Nun. Kalisi, alweren teister en hiberter, und der der Twishineie, und der Codiso. Wesley sidesteps with 18. Kite, calm under pressure. The king slides aside, smirking. Nice try, but you'll need more than that. The storm passes, but danger lingers. White pushes 19. Cx4. The c-pawn devours the black knight on d4. Chomp! Another one of Wesley's soldiers falls, but white's center opens dangerously in the process. Black retaliates with 19. Kafif, queen check. The black lady unleashes a deadly diagonal blast, slicing across the board. Juan Ramon's king feels the heat of her glare. White defends with 20. QD2. The queen leaps in front, shielding her king like a loyal bodyguard. "You'll have to get through me first," she cries, staring down Wesley's monarch. Black captures 20. QBOXB5. Bam! The black queen snatches the b5 bishop, balancing the score while grinning menacingly. Wesley is carving through the battlefield with queenly fury. White pushes 21. Tetter Biyuan, Penyasuwurchessen, Day 5. The pawn storms up like a battering ram, slamming into the black defenses and opening the central gates. Juan Ramon is hammering with all his might. Black answers. 21. BD7. The bishop slides back, a cool defensive move, like a general regrouping his troops behind the queen's shield. Wesley prepares for the counterstrike. White repositions, with 22. Nay 3. The knight sneaks to the edge, eyeing b5 and c4 like a shadow assassin waiting to strike under the moonlight. Black unleashes. 22. K6. The queen slithers back into the heart of the battlefield, looming over white's weak spots. Wesley's queen is hunting like a predator in the dark. White shields, with 23. QA2. The white queen slides into position, guarding her king while glaring at the black monarch. Juan Ramon's queen whispers, "Come closer, I dare you." And one is not here. Black checks again. 23. Kafiva, bang. Another queen shot, rattling white's defenses. Wesley fires off checks like a machine gun, forcing Juan Ramon to scramble. White repeats, with 24. QD2. Once more, the queen steps in front, an unyielding shield for her king. She's bruised but unbroken, defying the black queen's fury. Black replies 24. K6. The black queen taunts, retreating just enough to reload her cannon. Wesley is playing psychological warfare here. White blocks with 25. Hey. QA2. Queen to the front line again, like a knight in shining armor shielding his king. Juan Ramon refuses to budge, but his queen looks tired of this endless dance. Black fires 25. Kofif, bam. Wesley keeps hammering the same spot, check after check, like a battering ram pounding a castle gate until it cracks. White holds again, with 26. QD2. The white queen plants herself in front of the king like a stubborn shield. She's basically saying, "I'm tired of your cheap shots, Wesley." No. Black replies 26. Rate. The rook swings into the A-file, bringing another cannon to bear. Wesley reinforces his queen's attacks, lining up for a brutal crossfire. White sneaks 27. NG6. The knight leaps forward to chicks, a bold thrust into enemy territory. He eyes bait and date like a berserker looking for a victim to skewer. Black fires 27. KBUX-2. Boom. The black queen smashes down white's queen, ripping the shield away from Juan Ramon's king. The battlefield explodes with tension as the queens vanish. White recaptures 28. Cake SD2. The king himself steps into the fray, gobbling the black queen. A rare sight. The monarch wading into blood, his robes now stained with battle dust. Black strikes 28, bscxes. The bishop slices down the invading knight on g6. Down you go, horseman. Wesley reclaims balance with a cold execution, or White replies 29. dxc. The d-pawn retaliates, chomping the bishop and opening a deadly passed pawn. Juan Ramon suddenly has a spear pointed deep into Black's chest. Black answers 29. Sate, the rook glides to Sate, immediately locking eyes with the dangerous chick's pawn. Wesley says, "That pawn isn't going anywhere without my permission." Now we'll test this. White tries 30 order. b4. A pawn thrust on the queen side, supporting his chick's monster. The white army rallies behind its spearhead, dreaming of queening glory. Black sharpens his blade with 30. er6. The rook swings down and obliterates the chick's pawn, killing Juan Ramon's dream before it could rise. Wesley shows no mercy. White pushes 31 turret. b5. The pawn marches like a battering ram, staring straight at Black's rook on c6. Juan Ramon won't stop swinging, even after losing his spearhead pawn. Black responds 31. Or b6. The rook sidesteps, sliding to b6 like a tank repositioning its cannon, locking eyes on the pawn wall with deadly intent. White jabs 32. A bone. His rook joins the front, aiming directly at b6 toward Juan. Juan Ramon says, "If you want war, I'll give you war." On. England saying that Black shoves 32, d5, boom. The central pawn breaks loose, stomping forward like a war elephant. Wesley starts cracking open the center for his army. White counters with 33. nct2. The knight trots to c2, eyeing both b4 and d4 target. He looks like a sneaky assassin preparing to backstab. Black stiffens 33. 5. Another pawn hurls itself forward, giving Wesley double punching fists in the center. His pawns now look like two battering rams pounding at the gates. White swings 34. rb3. The rook slides up, preparing to double on the b-file or stab into enemy lines. A lurking vulture, ready to swoop down. Black develops 34. By fight. The dark bishop quietly steps back, lining up to strike later. He's like a sniper taking position on a rooftop, waiting for the perfect shot. White strikes 35. His pawn charges up the board, meeting Wesley's pawn wall head-on. Juan Ramon roars, "If I fall swinging." The center burns with fire. Black calmly slides 35. b6. The bishop floats into position, locking eyes with White's pawns and king. Wesley's dark bishop is now a predator circling the campfire. White thrusts, 36. E3. The pawn creeps up to G3, like a shield bearer preparing to block arrows. Juan Ramon steadies his formation, ready for the next blow. Black answers, 36, x4, smash. The e-pawn chomps white's far pawn, cracking the center wide open. Wesley's army is breaking through the walls. White snarls, 37, Pendai. JSF4, and his g-pawn immediately bites back, devouring black's far pawn. The center is now a bloody mess of exchanged bodies. Black swings 37, BBX4, the bishop lunges in, slashing down the white pawn on f-hour. Wesley's bishop is a cold-blooded executioner, carving up Juan Ramon's camp. White retreats 38. KD3, the king steps closer to the fight, almost foolishly brave, like a general walking into the front lines with no helmet. Black slides 38, PG7. Wesley calmly moves his king forward too, like saying, if your king wants to fight, mine won't hide either. The battlefield now has both monarchs exposed. White pushes 39. K4. His king advances even deeper, striding into no man's land like a warlord thirsty for glory. Juan Ramon is taking huge risks. Black marches 39, Kiev 6. Wesley's king follows, stepping into the center with fearless authority. Two kings now stare at each other across the smoking ruins. White chomps 40 Ti. KXD5. Bam. The white king personally kills the black pawn on D5, crushing it underfoot. Juan Ramon's monarch is dripping with blood, but dangerously exposed. Black sharpens his claws with 40, BX H2, the black bishop swoops in and slices down the H2 pawn. Wesley punishes the overextended king by stealing food from his table. White plants 41 Dertari. Nay3. The knight jumps back to E3, like a loyal guard trying to cover his king's reckless charge. Juan Ramon's army clings to discipline amidst the chaos. Black pushes 41, 5. A pawn storms up the board, Wesley sharpening his claws on the king's side. That pawn isn't just walking, it's charging with bloodlust. White countershifts 42. NC4. The knight leaps to C4, eyeing B6 and Ds. A dagger in the dark. This horse is circling the black rook's flank. Black calmly 42. Rebate. The rook slides to bait, like a fortress cannon locking onto the dangerous B-pawn. Wesley positions for the kill. White bites 43. E6. The pawn charges forward, a battering ram smashing through enemy lines. Juan Ramon's pawn is dreaming of promotion, screaming toward glory. Black stabs back 43. D8 check. The rook slashes down the d-file, forcing white's king to dance. Wesley's heavy artillery won't let the monarch breathe. White dodges. 44. K6. The king boldly steps aside, advancing deeper instead of retreating. Juan Ramon's monarch is a madman, in the middle of enemy guns. Black replies. 44. Key C5. Wesley's king marches forward too, joining the hunt like a predator smelling blood. B. Both kings are now hunting each other's pawns face to face. White roars. 45. Ethan. The pawn sprints to the 7th rank, standing one step away from coronation. The crowd gasps. Is Juan Ramon about to crown a new queen? Black steadies. 45. 4 fray. Another pawn storms forward, Wesley creating his own passed pawn on the king's side. It's now a deadly race. Who queens first wins the war. White saves with 46. Ne3. The knight jumps back to E3, desperately guarding the B7 pawn and covering promotion squares. Juan Ramon clings to hope with iron nails. Black swings. 46. Bait. The bishop slithers onto the diagonal, locking its scope directly at the B7 pawn. Wesley says coldly, "That pawn isn't becoming queen on my watch." White loads, up 47. RB5. The rook climbs the ladder, backing up the B pawn like a bodyguard yelling, "Make way for the prince about to be crowned." Black answers. 47. Bold 6 check. The rook lashes down the d-file like a whip, harassing white's wandering king. Wesley's rook is ruthless, never giving peace. White sidesteps. 48. Pentor Mulen. K6. The king ducks onto C5, crawling deeper into the firestorm. Juan Ramon's monarch is playing with flames, walking where no sane king should tread. Black steadies. 48. Re6. The rook shifts gears, blocking white's dreams of queening. Wesley positions every piece like a surgeon setting the trap. Ideal. White tries. 49. NC4. The knight leaps into the fray, covering key squares and shielding his rook. A desperate dance to hold the fragile pawn alive. Black cuts in with 49. Hike 3. Bam. The H-pawn surges forward, now only 2 steps away from queening. Wesley launches his missile. The pawn race is on, and it's neck and neck. White snaps. 50. KD5. The king struts forward again, into enemy fire, acting like a berserker. Juan Ramon is all in, throwing his king into the teeth of Wesley's cannons. Black calmly answers. 50. Re1. The rook slides to A1, drawing a cold blade across the board. Wesley's rook is ready to chop white's last defenses, while his pawn keeps sprinting. White lunges, with 51. In d2, the knight falls back to d2, clinging to his king like a loyal bodyguard. Juan Ramon shouts, "Hold the line, one last stand!" But the board is soaked in fire, and the defenses are cracking. Black strikes with 51, re5 boom. Wesley detonates the rook on f5 with check, a thunderclap that shakes the whole battlefield. The rook slices across like a guillotine, forcing the white king into chains. This isn't just a move, it's the killing blow, the moment Juan Ramon realizes the war drums have stopped, and only silence remains. The video ends here. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. Please don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thank you again, everyone. See you in the next video.